A woman named Diane Finch died alone in her apartment on the 4th floor of a building the city had been trying to condemn for 6 years. She was 41 years old. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as an accidental overdose. Fentanyl. She was found approximately 14 hours after she died by a neighbor who noticed her door had been left slightly open. There was no obituary. There was no service. What there was, sitting on her kitchen table, addressed to a name she had written on a post-it note, was a shoebox. I don't know how Diane knew my name. I don't know when she wrote it. What I do know is that everything inside that box had been organized, labeled, and arranged by someone who had spent years preparing for the moment someone finally decided to look. Diane Finch spent 7 years trying to get someone to care about her daughter. But here's the thing about Diane Finch that I didn't know when I opened that box. Not everything she was looking for was what she thought it was. I'm Cassandra Maddox. This is a story about a woman named Diane Finch who died alone, and nobody would have known her name if she hadn't left behind a shoebox. Inside it was the story of her daughter Mara, a 9-year-old who vanished 7 years ago and was forgotten by everyone except the one person who couldn't afford to forget her. Mara Finch was 9 years old on October 14th, 7 years ago. She was last seen at approximately 3:45 in the afternoon near the Caldwell Street fountain, 4 blocks from her school and 6 blocks from home. She was wearing a red jacket. She had a backpack with a drawing of a sun on it that she'd done herself with fabric markers. She liked maps. Her 3rd grade teacher wrote in a school report that Mara had a remarkable spatial memory, that she could draw the layout of her neighborhood from memory with near perfect accuracy. That same teacher wrote in the same report. Mara frequently arrives without lunch and appears tired. She is remarkably self-sufficient for her age. I want you to hold on to that sentence. We'll come back to it. Diane called 911 at 6:17 p.m. that Tuesday, 2.5 hours after Mara was last seen. The responding officer took a report. Standard questions, standard answers. He noted that Mara had no history of running away, no known custody dispute, and that the mother appeared cooperative and credible. The report was filed at 8:04 p.m. By 11:23 p.m. on day 3, during a shift change, with a different officer, a different sergeant, and 48 words entered into the narrative field, Mara Finch's case was reclassified from missing child to runaway. In the United States, a missing child classified as a runaway does not qualify for an Amber Alert. There is no mandatory federal notification. No multi-agency response is triggered. The case remains open technically, but operationally, it stops moving. The infrastructure designed to find missing children requires a specific classification to activate. Change that classification, and you don't just slow the investigation. You functionally end it. Mara Finch had been missing for 72 hours when someone decided she was a runaway. She was 9 years old. She had never run away before, and nobody, not one person in that precinct, pushed back on that reclassification. I spent 3 days assuming I knew why. I was wrong. The shoebox contained a lot of things: photographs, printouts, a handwritten timeline that ran to 11 pages. But the most important thing Diane left me wasn't about Mara at all. It was a folded piece of paper, 4 names written in blue ink. Below them, in Diane's handwriting, 1 sentence: all girls, all same precinct, all runaways, none found. I pulled every file. Kezia Drummond, age 10, disappeared 18 months before Mara, Reclassified as a runaway on day 2, combined documented investigative activity, 31 hours. Simone Ashimpong, age 8, disappeared 2 years after Mara. Reclassified as a runaway on day 4. Her mother called the precinct 11 times in the first month. Call logs show 2 callbacks. Tanya Reeves, age 13, disappeared 4 years ago. Reclassified as a runaway within 24 hours. A 13-year-old girl, and someone decided in one day she had chosen to leave. Destiny Okafor, age 11, 3 years ago. Reclassified on day 3. Her case file is 42 pages, the thickest of the 5. 40 of those pages are intake forms and administrative paperwork. 2 pages are actual investigative notes. 5 girls, 7 years, 1 precinct. A combined total of fewer than 200 hours of documented investigative work across all 5 cases. Every single one of them Black, between the ages of 8 and 13, from low-income, single-parent households in the same cluster of neighborhoods. Every single one reclassified as a runaway. Not one Amber Alert issued. Not one case solved. I want to be precise about what I'm saying. I am not telling you there was a meeting. I am not telling you someone drew up a plan. What I am telling you is that 5 little girls fell into the same gap, in the same place, in the same way. And at no point did anyone in that precinct stop and ask why the gap kept appearing in exactly the same shape. That pattern is real. That pattern is an indictment. But it is not the whole story. Detective Roland Spear filed Mara's original report. Retired now. Runs a private security consulting firm out of an office park near the airport. It took me 4 days to get him on the phone, and 2 more to get him to agree to meet. He chose a diner, cash only. 10 minutes, he said. We talked for 34. He told me the reclassification wasn't his call alone. He told me there was pressure, not explicit pressure. He was careful to say that, not explicit, but a current in the precinct that everyone understood. Cases you could move, you moved. Cases you couldn't. Cases with no witnesses, no physical evidence, no media attention, no city council member making calls. Those got managed. Closed in the way that kept the numbers clean. I asked him if he thought Mara had actually run away. He looked at his coffee for a long time. He said, I did what I was told. You close the ones you can't move. You move the ones that matter. That's how it works. It always has been. Then he said something else. Something I wrote down and didn't understand until much later. The order on Finch came from above me. It always came from above me on that street. You want to know why those cases moved the way they did. You don't talk to me. You talk to Castile. Sergeant Yvonne Castile, Spear's supervising officer at the time of Mara's disappearance. Still on the force. Still in the same precinct. Still signing off on cases. She didn't hang up when I called. She invited me in, offered coffee, pulled up the department policy manual on her computer and walked me through the classification guidelines with the calm of someone who has had this conversation before and has never once lost it. She said all 5 cases were handled in full accordance with departmental procedure. She said that with a straight face and steady hands. I noticed the steady hands. At the time I read it as composure, the practiced stillness of someone who has spent years defending indefensible systems. I've seen it before. I thought I recognized it. I was reading the wrong thing entirely. On her wall behind her desk was a commendation letter. Framed. I didn't get close enough to read the full text, but I could read the year. It was the same year Mara disappeared. The commendation was for outstanding case management efficiency. I left thinking I understood Yvonne Castile. I didn't understand her at all. Mark Webster is a city records clerk. He'd been corresponding with Diane for 8 months before she died. His last email to her reads, "I found something. Don't call me at work." He didn't respond to me for 6 days. Then a manila envelope appeared at a coffee shop Diane had mentioned in her emails, left at the counter with my name on it. No return address. Inside were internal precinct performance metrics, pulled from city administrative records, covering a 9-year window that included all 5 disappearances. During this period, the precinct was under sustained pressure from City Hall to improve case closure rates. Annual performance reviews tied supervisor evaluations directly to clearance statistics. The fastest way to improve a clearance rate without solving a case is reclassification. A runaway closes itself. The child is presumed to have left voluntarily. The case moves to inactive. The number gets better. In the 3 years following the implementation of the new performance review structure, runaway reclassifications in this precinct increased by 31%. Citywide, the increase was 9%. This precinct's increase was more than 3 times the city average, and the reclassifications were not evenly distributed. Cross-referencing the demographic data in those files, which I did manually over 2 days, the runaway label was applied at twice the rate to cases involving Black children compared to white children in the same precinct over the same period. Twice the rate, same neighborhood, same precinct, same years. The system produced a result, consistently, repeatedly, measurably, that made it easier for some children to disappear than others. That is true. That is documented. That is its own crime. But here is what I didn't see yet. Someone knew that system existed. Someone understood exactly how it worked. And someone used it, deliberately, surgically, as the perfect place to hide one specific disappearance among many. If you bury one stone in a riverbed, someone finds it. If you bury it in a pile of stones that already looks exactly like it, nobody looks twice. I didn't see it. Not yet. At the bottom of the shoebox, tucked into the lining, not placed on top, not labeled, hidden in the way you hide something you're not sure you're allowed to hope, was a photograph. A girl, maybe 15 or 16, standing outside a bus station in winter, coat too thin for the weather, looking slightly to the left of the camera like she didn't know she was being photographed. On the back, in Diane's handwriting, "Is this her? 2021? Mara would have been 16 in 2021. I traced the photograph. It led me to a woman named Precious Cole, a community outreach worker who runs a drop-in center 2 neighborhoods over from Caldwell Street. She remembered the girl, came in twice, wouldn't give a name, sat in the corner and drew in a small notebook. On her second visit, she left it behind. Precious gave me the notebook. I opened it to the last page. It was a map, hand-drawn, precise and detailed in the way that only someone with a very specific kind of spatial memory draws. Streets labeled in careful print, landmarks marked with small symbols. At the center of the map, the point everything else radiated from, was a fountain. Caldwell Street. I took the notebook to a forensic document examiner. She compared the drawing style, the lettering, the pressure patterns, to samples of Mara's school artwork Diane had kept in the box. Consistent. Not conclusive, but consistent. Mara Finch came back to the neighborhood. She sat in a warm room 2 miles from where she disappeared and drew a map back to the place she started. And then she walked out the door. I stared at that map for a long time, and then I noticed something I had missed the first time. The map didn't end at the fountain. There was a route, faint pencil lines extending northeast from Caldwell Street, through 2 neighborhoods, terminating at a specific address, marked with a small symbol I had to look at twice before I recognized it. A star. I went to that address. The property is registered to a shell name, a common enough tactic for someone who values privacy. But the utilities are billed to a real person. The name on the utility account was Yvonne Castile. I went back to the shoebox. I went back to everything. And I started pulling threads I hadn't thought to pull before. Mara's birth certificate was in the box. Diane's name on it. No father listed. I had looked at it once and moved on. This time I cross-referenced it against something I hadn't thought to check. Mara's school health intake form, filed when she started 1st grade. Standard form. Blood type listed. The blood type on the school form did not match what Diane's own medical records listed as possible for a biological child of hers. It is a small discrepancy, the kind that only surfaces if you are cross-referencing documents nobody thought to connect, the kind that gets missed because nobody is looking for it. Because why would they be? I pulled Yvonne Castile's employment history. 22 years on the force. Commendations, promotions. One anomaly. A leave of absence. 8 months. Taken at a posting she held before transferring to her current precinct. No reason listed on the official record. The dates place it approximately 9 years before Mara was born. I am not going to tell you what I think happened during those 8 months. I don't have proof. What I have is an absence, a gap in a record where something should be and isn't, in the way that gaps appear when someone has worked very carefully to make sure they do. What I do know is this. Diane Finch raised Mara, loved Mara, built a 7-year case file out of grief and determination, and a mother's refusal to accept that her daughter simply didn't exist anymore. But Mara was not biologically hers, and somewhere along the way, in the months before she disappeared, in that apartment full of gaps and instability, and a shoebox Diane hadn't yet started filling, Mara found something, a document, a photograph, a name, something that cracked the story she had been told about herself wide open. Mara Finch didn't run away. She ran toward someone. She was 9 years old. She had a remarkable spatial memory. She could draw her neighborhood from memory with near-perfect accuracy. And she found her way, on her own, on foot, with no one helping her, to the door of the woman who had given her up, the woman who then went to work the next morning and buried her file, who signed the reclassification, who made sure no one looked, who received a commendation that year for outstanding case management efficiency. Yvonne Castile didn't bury Mara's case out of indifference. She didn't bury it because of institutional rot or performance metrics or a precinct conditioned to look away. She buried it to protect herself. And in doing so, whatever her reasons, whatever happened when a 9-year-old appeared at her door, she gave Mara something Diane's apartment never could: a way out. If you're still here, you're one of the curious ones. Stick around. The next mystery's already waiting.